I represent Tri-HR Solutions today. I understand that we're going to go through an interesting topic, the topic being setting performance expectations. So before we dive into the presentation, I'd like to share a little clip of YouTube that I feel you might enjoy. So a few examples of how these roles that were depicted might have had performance set, right? Performance expectation set. Sometimes managers set up expectations without alignment to the vision of what they want to create, right? And so that is perhaps some of the examples that we saw there. Yeah, they were doing their job, they were doing the form, right? But were we reaping out the results that the vision of that company indicated that they wanted to be like, or they wanted to show up in life like? And so it's very important to keep that in mind as we go through the presentation. So 70% of strategic failures come from poor execution of leadership. Now, you're surprised to see that that number is that high? 70% of the failures, and this is Ram Shriram, who's known as a big guru in business advice, and is contracted by many, but 70% poor execution. Keep that as we go along. So how many of you own your own business? And how many of you envision having your own business? Good. How many of you work for a business that you contribute in one way or another? Okay, thanks. And so how many of you have had a vision statement about your business or that place of work? Do you have a vision, or the place of work that you are a part of has a vision statement? Yeah? Yep. And so if some of you perhaps don't have a formal vision statement, how many of you have in one way or another envisioned your business operating in an optimal performance state? If you envision how that... We'll go there today.
Define optimal.
Optimal. Well, it's what optimal would be for each individual, right? Obviously, somebody once asked me, define greatness, define excellence. It's what it is for you, right? And so, but you know, in general, optimal is you are executing flawlessly. You are gaining momentum in your business with the customer base that you've hoped for or aspired, and you are getting the performance that you are expecting from your employees. So that could be a way of defining optimal. Does that answer your question? Yeah. And so what is a business? And certainly, I put this here so that as we set the framework for today's discussion, we have an opportunity to realize as we communicate that a business is a group of processes. And so we cannot focus on a few processes and forget others, because that will hinder the overall outcome. So it's sort of like preparing our minds to have system thinking. Peter Senge from the Fifth Discipline is one of my heroes in terms of organization effectiveness. And he introduced in MIT this whole concept of system thinking. Everything we do is systematic, right? Even when we brush our teeth, even when we go and throw the garbage, even when we are, getting ready to go to work, we have some type of system in place, right? And so businesses, for performance reason, have systems in place. And so a business cannot maximize its potential if it only concentrates in one aspect and forgets the other, okay? So the whole concept of system thinking is where we want to go with this. So what is setting performance expectations? When you look at the word performance and expectations, what comes through your mind? Any volunteer? Execution.
Empowerment.
Absolutely. Execution, empowerment of whom?
Your employees.
Of your employees, yeah.
I don't tell them what to do, they tell me what needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Yeah. So I have a little definition just for us to kind of gain an understanding of all the components of setting expectations that we're going to discuss today. It is the practice by which a leader establishes role clarity, right? There is a role clarity establishment to achieve satisfactory outcomes. That execution you were talking about, that empowerment that you were mentioning, and delineates the behavior associated with the delivery of those outcomes. Sometimes we forget that part. We say, this is what I need you to do, and we don't go as far as saying, and this is how I need you to do it. Which, by the way, if you saw in the clip, many were told, you receive the customer and tell them what's going on. But we didn't notice from those clips behaviors that businesses would be and leaders would be supportive of, right? There were some behaviors in those clips that if we're business owners, we probably don't want our employees to be communicating in that fashion. And most importantly, effectively communicates and monitors progress in a collaborative approach with the employee. So as Dea mentioned, I don't tell them what to do. I am hoping and expecting that there is an opportunity for employees also to bring and initiate, based on our discussion, based on the strategy that you're looking at, here's how I can contribute. And these are the things I can do. It's beautiful when someone has that level of empowerment and when the boss understands the embedded treasure that lies in, helping someone maximize their potential in that fashion. So it is indeed important, the communication and the monitoring of the progress in a collaborative approach. It is important to, as we look through these slides, that we see that it's very proactive driven. So there is some work that is done ahead, but there is tons of work that is eliminated in the back end, right? Tons of work and potential risk that is eliminated in the back end by doing this proactive approach. And so the performance management cycle is comprised of planning, progress review, and evaluation, right? And so many of us have worked in one business or another, have either participating in a managerial capacity or as an employee, where we go through understanding what that planning is, of what needs to be done and how it needs to be done, and then going through a progress review, which this aspect here, having been in corporate America for over 20-something years in the HR field, is where we lack the most consistency. We set expectations at the beginning of the year, and at the end of the year we said, what happened? And there are surprises and there's tons of things. Yet when we have a system that looks at the progress that is being made, be it through just looking at a spreadsheet to see where we're going, or having that one-on-one discussion if our business is small enough where we can have discussion with other employees, with all the employees, right? But if it's too large of a system, our business, then instead of sitting with everybody, it's sort of like putting in place some type of tools that can help us see a full picture of what's going on, right? And so that we can tweak as we go along. And then obviously evaluating that process at the end. So performance outcomes, we mentioned that that's part of the setting performance expectations. So when we start our year, or before the years get started, most businesses in the November or October, December timeframe are doing their strategic plan, right? Or they're thinking of what I want to experience next year. And what are some things I'm going to need to do as a leader or as an employee to help my business succeed, right? And so during that period of time, there might be some goals that are being established. The company might be saying, hey, we're going to branch out to a new market. We're going to do this differently. We're no longer are going to have these vendors, whatever those goals might be. And so as those goals are trickled down in the organization, it is important that not only the leaders are thinking how we're going to do this, but the employees also take on those discussions and formulate ideas of how they can bring that vision to life, how they can make those things happen with initiative, right? And so that is the part that we talk about the what. What must be accomplished? So if we want to go to new markets, right? Or if the example is that we want to shrink our business, sometimes that's the strategic direction. What needs to be accomplished is the what, right? Is the objective side of setting expectation. When it comes to the other side, the competencies, those are the behaviors needed to accomplish the work goals. The behaviors that are going to drive those objectives, right? So that there is alignment with how people are coming through in their role with what's being asked. So how it must be accomplished. So why set objectives, right? Some people get confused with objective goals, setting expectations, all these lingo, right? But setting objectives after you've had in mind as a leader, or when your company has shared how they're going to go to market that following year, is to present an objective that will guide the employee and the manager to think of planning for results, not just planning for activities, okay? Because it's very easy to get carried away with all these activities, and you end up with tons of activities that never match with what the vision was. In this case, the guy had a form that needed to be completed. And that form might have never hit the vision in terms of fulfilling the goals for that year. But he had an activity that he had to do, right? So it's very important to distinguish between activities and between objectives. Not that filling the form is not important, but not putting the emphasis only on the activity. So an example of an activity would be pick up the phone, right? That will be part even of the job description, pick up the phone. But if we think through, in setting performance expectation, about the experience that we want our customer to have when they call, the setting expectation will not just say, pick up the phone. The setting expectation will go beyond and say, on a timely fashion,
pick it up by the third ring and answer it as if it's your best friend.
Yes. What attitude needs to be reflected over the phone that distinguish us as a company, right? I have a very interesting example. I was celebrating with my family my dad's birthday, 74th birthday in Disney. He'd never been to Disney World. And he was here from the Dominican Republic, and there were 4 generations visiting, my kids, their kids, my dad and I. And so I call in and I say, my dad is celebrating his 74th birthday. I would like to see what can be done, or which park do you recommend? And so the lady at Disney on the phone says, first of all, she answered, hi, how may I help you? You've called Disney where the magic starts with me. I already was feeling the magic, right? Where the magic, I said, what did you say? And she said, I know. Well, the magic does start with me. How can I help you? And it did, because she recommended a package that my dad had one of the best birthdays ever, because of everything was orchestrated in such a way that I had no worries that that was going to go flawlessly, you know? And so it's very important that as we are setting expectations, we anticipate what is the experience we want those individuals to have when we are interacting. And so as leaders, it's important, what is the attitude that that person needs to receive, right? And all of that happens when we're being proactive and we are anticipating, okay, so we have 30 clients a month that call, and their needs are this, and their frustration levels are this. Okay, so let's even model. If you were a client calling and you just called our office, just go ahead and call the office. What did you experience, right? And so going through all that stuff ahead of time saves time for the back end, for the results. So we're going to go also to provide a little bit of tips. And so some tips are, when you're helping develop clear, specific objectives for a performance plan, start each objective with an action verb. That's a good tip. Increase, complete, attain, right? That sort of like move the individual into an action mode where it's not passive, pick up the phone, but ensure prompt response, or answering the phone on the third ring.
If I pick up the phone in the office, somebody's going to hear about it. Because
Yes.
that means it rang more than 3 times.
Yeah. So you have specific expectations set, right? And the employee base probably all know that.
Because my competition is that 1-800, let me put you on hold, punch 1 for this, punch 2 for that.
Yeah.
And
You don't have that. So that is one of your differentiation. I always...
They call our office wanting to speak to a person.
Yes. Yeah. So you are differentiated by design, right? The design is your expectation of answering that phone on the third ring. And so people that call your business have the satisfaction that, I'm not going to be put on hold. I'm going to talk to a live person, Yeah, very good example, Dale. So define quantity, define costs, timeliness, define quality, dates, time frame, by when you want to accomplish what. That's very important. It's another tip. Avoid writing an all or nothing objective, okay? It's sort of like, I am going to respond to every single call at the first ring. That might not be realistic, right? So it's important to understand the all or nothing. Don't mistake activities for an objective. We talked about that. Make sure an objective is within the person's influence, right? So be the point of contact for everyone in this office. That might not be realistic for that one individual. So it's very important, that we think these things through. Make sure it's observable so that other people can give you feedback and can sense what's that. Limit the number of activities limit the number of objective between 3 and 7. So don't formulate 20 things that are objective at the beginning of the year for one employee, because it's going to get lost, right? So if you focus on 3 to 7 things that are in alignment with your vision, it's going to be easier for that employee to be able to zone and laser focus their attention to those yes. Ask if the objective benefits you or the employer, the work group, or the organization. If it doesn't, just rewrite it, right? So why set competencies? We talked about this, and that is because it illustrates the behavior that needs to be demonstrated, right? Some people need that extra guidance. And we sometimes in the leadership field take it for granted and say, well, he should know better, or she should know better. Oh, I was on the assumption that if I hired you as a receptionist, you would know what to do, right? And those assumptions cost us money, and sometimes cost us even litigation, believe it or not, okay? So it's very important that we don't make assumptions and we incorporate what behaviors we would like to see display in those setting of performance expectations. This is a model from DDI. DDI is Development Dimension International. It's an organization that both Jackie and I are certified to facilitate. And basically they take a goal and they take the competency, and then they don't stop there. They recommend that you also, as part of that development plan, add an element of learning and development. So that if we're saying that that person is going to be now focusing on, let's say it's a crew of salespeople that you have, right? And this sale workforce is now going to be delivering value selling. And it's a new skill. So we want to probably train them on that, right? And so that will be part of their development plan that year. Value selling training. Because now our philosophy is we don't sell just one product, we sell also the value of a solution instead of just the one product, right? So it's very important to look at that, and it goes into the activities. This is the behaviors that need to be demonstrated, and those are the targets and the objectives. So why set performance expectation? It's a question for anyone that would like to
There's no goal, there's no judgment.
There is no goal, no judgment.
No way to measure.
No way to measure. No journey.
Yeah.
Right? Or there is a journey of probably the 70% that Ram Charan is talking about, right? Which is failure. And as leaders, we have a responsibility to help the entire group that supports our business have a level of clarity of where we're going, right? And so, I mean, people say, well, you know, I share the vision, they should know better. Making assumption costs us money. So it's really important that leadership gets on point with this. And that entails how clearly the expectations are set when you have the desire to stay in a company, right? To work for someone or work with someone. So, yeah, we set expectations to optimize our business, to know direction, to have a journey flawlessly, great execution, but we also do it to avoid very, very risky litigations, okay? We've been in cases where an employee has come to my office and has said, it's the 6th month of the year and my boss hasn't told me what it is that he expects of me or she expects of me. And I think he's setting me up because he wants to fire me. And if that's the case, I'm going to sue. And on the basis of what I'm going to sue, I'm a protected class. And it's amazing all the rationale that goes through people's mind when that is the case, right? And so mitigating that is establishing clear set expectations, because when those expectations are there, the employee can't really say, I was not given direction, you know, or pull out a situation of, you know, I'm being discriminated against. And most of these cases, when they go to the EEOC or any other external agency, just to address these matters, sometimes it's 25 grand. Just to address it. Who wants to really dish money out of not being proactive with their business, which is a fundamental responsibility, right? So that's one of the reasons, as well as all the great reasons that we've discussed in terms of flawless execution and optimization of business, etc. So when do we set expectations? When does that start? Anyone? Erika?
Yes.
And Racing.
I would say when we're interviewing, I always share what expectations we have, and then on their date of hire, the process that I go through is we sit and go through all the handbooks and their job description and their expectations at that point.
Beautiful.
And continually build on that.
Beautifully said. So you don't wait until a person is on board. You are actually in that setting expectation mode as you're interviewing. And if we go a little bit step further with proactivity, it goes into the conception of that job. So when we are in our mind conceiving that job to post, we're setting expectations through what? The job description, right? We're setting expectation through the posting, what the posting is going to say that I'm looking in terms of credentials, in terms of, you know, background, etc., and all that stuff. So you see how setting expectation is above and beyond when you are face-to-face with the employee, is at the very early stage of that conception of that job, right? So that you have an understanding. And when it comes to the employee side, it's the same thing. When we go as an employee to be hired, we're setting expectation of the interview of that company. We're interviewing that company as well. So we're setting expectations for that company of how they're going to treat us and what type of environments we desire to experience, right? And what developmental opportunity we're seeking. So it's a two-way street. The whole setting expectation is important to have an understanding very, very early in conception.
I let my employees do the interview.
You do? Tell me more about that. I like that.
Yeah. Well, I send out resumes and they come in and I pick, you know, the ones that I figure are qualified.
Yeah.
And then I pick what I figured to be the top 5. And then I invited them in to speak to who they will be working with, and ask them the questions behind closed doors before meeting myself or my partner. And then they tell me who they could work with, number 1, 2, and 3. And then at that point in time, we interviewed those 3 people, and they actually picked what I would have considered to be number 3 to be number 1, and she's still there.
Innovative ways of...
Because she's not going to work with me, she's going to be working with them.
Correct.
And if they're happy and can pass that on in an interview process, then salary and everything else, working conditions are just secondary.
That is very innovative.
Is it peer-to-peer or supervisor
No,
to
it's peer-to-peer.
peer-to-peer?
Peer-to-peer.
Oh, wow.
Who your supervisor is probably already past that peer point because they're happy because they're there. But who are you going to be working with? How do you like the company? As the boss is good? You know, what do you guys do for lunch? I mean, you know, what you know, that whole thing. I mean, they just, and I have no idea what goes on in that conversation and I don't ask.
Setting the expectation,
But
right?
if they can't work with, I don't want to have to ask my employees what they're doing. Because they know, and they know that they have to work congruently and positively with one another. We're a small organization on a team. And if they can't do that, then I can't, what I pay them and what everything else is literally secondary.
Yeah. I think Dale is way ahead when it comes to the whole evolution of work, right? A lot of people are still operating at the industrial age when it comes to interviewing or providing an environment or giving directions. This is what I need you to do. Versus understanding that we're dealing with knowledge-based workforce.
UCF?
Yes. Yes. It's a knowledge-based workforce, so behaviors and interaction are completely different to when we needed someone to put chips in an assembly line, right? And even at that situation of an assembly line, it's important to gradually progress to understanding this whole hierarchy here, the past and the future, right? Where there was a hierarchy, fixed working hours, hoarding information, command and control, and fear-based leadership. Those are notions of the past. On-premise technology, emails is primary form of communication. Not anymore, right? If we go to the future, we see that it's a flattened structure, not a lot of hierarchy, it's more flattened structure. Flexible working hours is more on demand now. Sharing of information, engaging, empowering, and inspiring leaders. Cloud technology, email is secondary it's a secondary form of communication. All of that. It's important to incorporate the evolution of work into how we carry our business. So great, thank you for sharing that innovative approach of setting expectations. I was actually putting these slides together, and last night my daughter said, "It's a trickle-down effect, Mom." So I said, that is pretty good. That's the benefit. It's a trickle-down effect. Employees are more engaged. And the number one reason, or the number one issue that we have with the organization today is employee engagement. There's a lot of people retired on the job. There's a lot of people, and if you measure, there are ways of measuring now, but if you measure this engagement, what it costs to your company, it's astronomical.
Cost of having to rehire, retrain, re-interview.
It's astronomical.
It's huge.
This is very important. This is why Jackie was emphasizing that she wanted to carry out this type of presentation today, to kind of re-emphasize, because she gets called on cases where it's after the fact and you are addressing performance issues with an employee and doing performance improvement plans where it goes into another presentation, right?
When do you make the decision, or when do you identify that that is an employee that is just not aligning, or that is not on board with your culture? What is the point of no return? So you've done the orientation, you've done the coaching, and yet obviously there isn't. How much more do you continue trying to keep that employee?
Okay, very good question. The much more trying can be a double-edged sword, okay? The much more, depends on how much you've done, right? And we can discuss that.
Right.
But the much more trying can play against you because you would be supporting the behavior, right? Because it's lingered for 7 years, right? And you knew from 5 years ago that this was going on. So that much more can play a double-edged sword on your end, even though you can share that, you've been very understanding and look, it took you 5 years to fire the person. But the reality is this: in my 25 plus years in human resources, I always say I never fire people.
Nope.
People make choices. And someone might choose not to work here based on their behavior or their output. So it's not.
If you don't change your attitude, I will change your address.
And you'll move on. And maybe the right place for that person is somewhere else. But to answer your question as it pertains, it's very important that the person has a clear understanding of what the job specifications are, right? The legal term is the essential functions of the job, right? So once you know the essential functions of the job, that's important. The second thing, and that's, when it comes to developing job descriptions, within the HR functions, we are guided that essential function of the job has to be there, clearly delineated. So that's one thing. The second thing is, those goals were established as we were discussing today, not at the end, or not after the fact, or no assumptions really were made, but the establishment of the planning and reviewing were all there. The best thing that can happen with an employee like that is when you are doing those reviews, really systematic. Month 3 of the year. Well, we were supposed to develop this website and it's not developed. What's going on? How can I help you? What is something that is lacking here that is inhibiting you from completing this goal? Well, I asked for this tool and this software and it's never been ordered. Okay, well, the software got here, it's month 4. Month 6, the website hasn't been developed. Month 6, we sit again. I want to understand, why is this goal, this objective, why has it not been met? You mentioned last quarter that you needed the tools. The tool were here on month 4. What's going on? Well, yeah, the tool is here, but no one wants to collaborate. Well, you own this objective. It is my expectation that you drive this initiative. You see, on month 6, I am holding the person accountable. Holding people accountable is critical to eliminate grief. So my expectation is, it's month 6, my expectation is that by the end of August or the end of September, this project that should have been completed in March be done. Can you agree to that? Rearrange, renegotiate. Can you agree that by September this is going to be done? Yes, I can agree to that. Perfect. You put it in writing. It's very important to document. Number 1, because we have tons of work, right? And number 2, because we don't have a way to recollecting things, right? So just put it in that particular file for that employee. September comes up, October you meet again. The item is completed, you're satisfied. There is no surprise in December, you see? October comes up, the item is not completed, you have now a write-up of, this is not meeting. And you can initiate that write-up there. You don't have to wait for the end. Depending on what your policies are and so forth, we can talk more. So thank you very much for participating in setting performance expectations.